Thank you very much for the invitation to the Nigerian Academy of Science. My name is Ladipo. I'm a fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Science, but my original specialization is geology. However, in my 45 years and more of career, I've spent nearly half of it in the industry and half in academia. As a matter of fact, I'm talking to you from one of the universities in Nigeria, University of Benin, where I've come to assist them on something, a process for today and tomorrow. One of the things I find extremely important, which we need to pay attention to as academics, is how to take our research findings from the desk to society in order to create more value. I worked in Shell for 22 years. And I've worked in other oil and gas companies where technology, both in Nigeria and outside, has played a major role. And there's a big gulf between what we teach and how we teach as academicians and what the industry requires. Just listening to a brief part of what the last speaker presented, my worry about that, and pardon me if I'm a little bit over presumptuous, is how much of this has actually gone from the desk to the table, and particularly how adequately prepared our young extensional agricultural professionals that we train, how much of capability do they have so that these applications can become relevant? And I'm using Nigeria as a case study or presenting the critical situations in Nigeria because that's what I'm most familiar with. But I dare say that it's probably common to many other developing countries. We have a group of highly trained professional academicians and thinkers. We need to do a little bit more, if not a lot more, of how to get these knowledge into more applied form. Especially in medical sciences, they call it translational research, but I'd like to dwell a little bit more on how we can engineer that as well. Like I said, if I take Nigeria as an example, what I find here in Nigeria is that, excuse me, I'll just give a bit of background. Nigeria's population about 190 million and about 66 below 35 years. The 170 universities that we have to accommodate a group of young people between the ages of 16, 18, and 25, which constitutes about the almost 2 million people that apply for university education as of 2019. And you can see from that table that it is growing, and it is expected to grow as nearly 50 million Nigerians progress into that age group. So that puts a lot of pressure on our educational system, because every young person in the world now wants to have a university degree. The same thing in the United States, for example, if you look at the statistics. And if you look at our population in Nigeria, the unemployment is really rising, and it's going to set to rise even more. The African Development Bank data suggests that the population is even going to grow to about 250 million in the next 30 to 40 years. And my view, from my thinking over the last 40, 45 years, is that we not only need to bring back technological education and skills, but we also need to look at how we can infuse emerging technologies into how we train and what we train the young graduates about. Because that has a very, very major impact on developing entrepreneurship and self-employment. The statistics, that pie diagram on the left shows that science and technical services constitutes only about 4% to the nation's GDP. If you can expand the influence of that, just imagine what it is going to mean for agriculture, for trade, for example. Information and communication is expanding over the years, but certainly that is more for social rather than technological applications impact. So there is a potential for that in order to be able to grow our GDP. And we can see there that we really need to develop a strategy. Higher education is in the heart of the UNESCO SDG 4 goal. Different countries have different ways of assessing their progress, but you will see how relevant that is going to be. But essentially what we need to do, in my own view, even my experience, is how do we grow science directly infused into what we teach and how we teach. These two pictures show what I call our current realities. Things are still written on the blackboard. And on the right is a picture of an anatomy of science, an anatomy of medicine class from a university recently. It's very, very alarming. How are these undergraduates going to appreciate or acquire any knowledge? The challenges of teaching are many: funding, infrastructure, opposite manpower, to even the basics of emerging technologies is not there. If you compare this to the Western world, we are miles and miles and miles away. Data and information access is a major problem, but that is surmountable. Internet bandwidth and penetration, we've seen the impact of that, especially during the last lockdown. It affected a lot of developing countries and the underdeveloped world severely. I happen to have personal experience about that because my wife runs a primary school here in Nigeria. It's even difficult to get all the pupils, the parents of all the pupils, to get their children connected and they've lost about 7-9 months. The impact of that, if you look at what the global assessment is going to take a couple of years to recover from, and the widening gap between the Western world and the developing world. Coupled with the overwhelming demand for university education rather than technical education, which in itself is lacking, in my own view. So therefore, we need a very, very well-coordinated policy and implementation strategy. And we need to change the mindsets of people without forgetting information or without forgetting the impact of new technologies. But more importantly is that we need to look at the content. Just to show a few more examples, I've picked this from a recent workshop that Nigerian Academy held in December 2019, and we had contributors from all over the world. So to many of you in this audience, application of AI and other emerging technologies is not new, but these are just a few basic examples: augmented reality, Internet of Things using the smart umbrella, for example, which we need obviously in the equatorial world, for example, where sometimes rain can start almost immediately. The last speaker has talked about some of the new applications using satellite data for monitoring agricultural development. My question here will be, how do we extend all this knowledge directly? The beauty about science is that it's the outliers that should have the greater interest of academicians. And those outliers, both as a geologist, you need to be able to have the basic knowledge of these emerging technologies in order for you to be able to address them and improve the algorithms of these emerging technologies and have greater application to society where it is needed. The SDG goals, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this, but it emphasizes one point: the ability to capture data, to manipulate it, and therefore, we need to have to put in a lot of effort in order to be able to create a clearer and shared value-added services for everybody, from the student, business sector, government, partners, etc., and so on. And I think the academia, and especially our young scientists, need to play role about this. When you talk about a policy-guided approach, the fourth generation technologies, artificial intelligence, deep learning, language translation, etc., and so on. For us to be able to do that, we need to start early to infuse this so that we can, from the basic level, we can engender awareness and create interest in the young. Where do we want to go? That picture on the right side is an example. I'll show you an expanded picture of this. This is actually from the lab where I'm located now, from the University of Benin in Nigeria. And I dare say that when this was created about 10 years ago, when I was the director of the center, it was the first, let me say the second, of such centers where technology rules the day in Nigeria. And I'll tell you why. So it's not just about embedding the skills of emerging technologies. It also has to do with our curriculum. I dare say that if you look at the curriculum of science and engineering in institutions, my first question will be, by the time you get a graduate into the level, say third or fourth year level, how much in today's world in the industry, we need to optimize our workflows. We need to integrate our workflows. And that demands the ability to manage and manipulate data, large volumes of data, so that our workflows can become better, our results can become more holistic in approach. So, and we need people to be able to help train our graduates in doing that. Oh, hang on. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Don't mind me, my brain always has difficulties in the afternoon. I don't have to say this again to such experts group as this, but it all has to do with developing predictive scenarios and models based on rule-based inferences and systems into our methodology of capacity acquisition. There are so many types of categorizations of knowledge base, knowledge types now. And you guys are perhaps the experts on that. Well, how I think the challenge here really is changing the reasoning from to a more deductive one in how we teach our fundamental subjects, physics, mathematics, geosciences, etc., and so on. Perhaps far less in those mathematical sciences. But even agriculture, as we have seen, you need to be able to develop coding skills early. You need to be able to develop AI skills so that you can integrate, you can quickly adapt a technology to fit the local setting. Rainfall patterns across Nigeria varies from south to north, not to talk of across the regions. For example, sunlight terms vary tremendously, but the extensional agricultural experts need to be able to go into the systems that he's using for his predictive model and change a few variables and adapt it to exactly the local setting. Let me give you an example from the oil and gas industry. When you talk about big data, you cannot have anyone more than greater in terms of data volume that is required than the oil and gas industry. In my last work where I retired about just early in Q1 this year, we deal with trillion gigabyte data set just to be able to define and manage one field where we produce oil and gas. I remember going to a review, and the data we got back, we had to buy 2 terabytes of external drive to be able to move the data. A lot of this now you can do virtually online, which is that figure on the top extreme right. All this information needs to be archived and accessed on a regular basis. That shows you the magnitude of what we mean by big data, particularly in an example of science and engineering profession. You also need diverse skills from engineers, geoscientists, petroleum, oil and gas experts that have to work together and have to integrate their different workflows. I'm not going to bother you for that. But industry is always in the forefront. The likes of Baker Hughes, the likes of Schlumberger, for example, and so on and so forth, and many other independents, they do a lot of background work to create workflows, automated workflows for the oil and gas industry. Billions of dollars are invested in this. But one of the things that's very important about it is that they make it so adaptable for companies to utilize it easily in their workflows. What we need to do is to follow the example of how these industries are automating their workflows. In Nigeria, for example, Schlumberger started a program which they call Ocean View Competition, where they ask university undergraduates and perhaps master students to take part in a competition where they create very easy to use workflows. They provide data. They provide the technology. As you see on that picture on the right, that's a class going on right here in University of Benin. That's where we want to be, where technology that is provided and data by a company like Schlumberger, by Shell, and other companies are easily manipulated. They also provide the hardware, and they send their qualified skilled people to come and teach here. That's a very essential strategic step that we all need to adopt. I think, in my view, that our university systems particularly need to embrace the oil and gas industry to be able to advance technological awareness skills into the people that we train. And I dare say that that model is something that must work and can work across all the spheres of science and engineering. To be able to achieve that, we need a national and a global policy on education. The SDG 4 policy framework needs to be driven down from government, not just at the government level, but also at the very, very lowest level of our educational institutions. That requires a lot of thinking and a lot of work. The coronavirus lockdown has exposed our bellies, if I may use that word, and apologies if for those who may be offended by that phrase, because a lot of us, even in tertiary institutions, could not deliver because of lack of access. A colleague of mine, for example, even said that in the UK, some of the universities had to provide laptops for some of their graduates, some of their undergraduates, so that they could follow online lectures. I've talked about the emphasis and the need for digital knowledge so that we can automate more and more the simplest workflow routines that we utilize, and ultimately reduce the delivery time for projects. If you are able to do that, you are going to lower the cost of business decisions. That's very important. A lot of countries have to deal with infrastructure issues, power, not to talk of internet provision, etc., and so on, which is still an issue. Just about 30 minutes, about an hour ago, we were carrying out some interviews online. And for a few of us that were on that interview, we had some hitches because people were located in about 10 different locations across the country. So I've talked about making hardware available. It's part of that deliberate strategy that countries need to and institutions need to follow. I'm sure that this should not be a problem if universities embrace industry more deeply. Skills within the faculty, IT skills, emerging technology, which is growing at a fantastic rate, needs to be the universities cannot do it alone. Because let's face it, funding that is required will come from the industry that are spending billions of dollars on research and technology. In the past, when I was in the oil and gas industry, we used to have this restriction that when you do a project, the company keeps it under wraps for a couple of years. By the time I was retiring 10 years ago, my first retirement, it had shortened to 6 months. Now, even industry is collaborating amongst themselves because they realize that knowledge is now ubiquitous. But the advantages of drawing closer to the industry is to fund our research, make it very relevant. Translation of that research to value creation becomes, an automatic thing. You don't have to worry about patents. I know many of my colleagues who have patents, but they're just sitting down there in the library. So, in Nigeria, government has recently created an initiative by Tech Fund, which is one of those agencies to drive development of the oil and gas industry. I hope it's going on well. But a group of people have suggested that governments should think about creating a digital fund maybe that's local to Nigeria. My penultimate slide, again on the enablers, will include the policies of different nations. There's no doubt about it that digital knowledge is key. We need to upscale our internet systems and infrastructure. We need to move towards providing unlimited access, or at least at a very, very low stage. Cloud computing is now very, very cheap, but you need a very strong internet network to be able to move your data up into the cloud. Improve our infrastructure, making hardware available, and collaboration with the industry. Maybe this is more or less like a repeat slide. Apologies for that. So I may be talking to the converted in this conference. However, I think we should take into serious consideration how we move our research findings very, very fast and very, very collaboratively into society, so that one of our major stakeholders and ourselves can start to create value and provide more data, more real data, so that we can develop better models that will improve our efforts. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Federal University of Technology at Akure. The invitation was short, but I hope that I've been able to express my views in a nice way, not tending to be rude, if I may use that word, but in a nice way. A lot of the information I've used here came from the Academy workshop that was held in December 2019. And of course, the Nigerian Academy of Science for asking me to do this on their behalf. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it.